Hi everyone. Today it looks like we got the gap up, gap down from the Friday into the Monday, but is this structure going to break and will it break these EMAs? Let's take a deeper look. Do me a quick favor and like and subscribe and watch the video till the end to help out the channel, and let's get started. Looking at the Fear and Greed Index, we did step down to a 70 from a 73. Markets were a little bit bearish today, still hovering in extreme greed. Interesting to see those really not giving any ground here versus momentum stepping back all the way to neutral. Put call ratio continues to elevate, although it is still in greed. I think this is going to push up to that 0.8 area. And then VIX obviously spiking up here. Big move on the VIX all the way up to 22.6. So that hit our first target at 22.5. Safe haven demand, still extreme greed, not pulling back quite yet. And then junk bonds. Fear here hasn't really moved a whole lot, not telling us much. We're starting to see some of these metrics crack, but strength and breadth still holding in there very strong. Moving over to seasonality, you can see seasonally this is a bearish period. So based off of today's price action, it seems like we're going to get that follow through on the weekly action. The low of this move is around the 10th of the month. So we have a couple more days of downside potential here into that period. And then it's supposed to bounce from there a little bit. Not a whole lot, from around the 2.5 up to the 1.5, so about a 1% bounce before we get the lows of the month on the 25th or potentially the 29th. So it is supposed to go a little bit lower this month, but right now is still a bearish period. Moving over to the economic calendar, you can see consumer credit came in worse than expected. Previous number was revised up, however. Really not a whole lot for the Monday. Tomorrow, Atlanta Fed GDP going to be interesting. Trade balance, fairly interesting. 3-year note bond auction, want to see how that comes in after the big rise in yields we've been watching over the last couple trading days. And then for the Wednesday 10-year note auction, Fed minutes, that's definitely going to be interesting, especially relative to that 10-year note auction. Want to see how that stabilizes after everything we've seen so far. And that's it for the short term. Looking at max pain here, we got 567 was max pain, and that's basically where we went straight to already. Current stock price 567.80, so we did go just a little bit above it. But considering how much we were above it on the Friday session and how much we moved today, we basically moved right on top of it. It'll be interesting to see how that continues to play. And then looking at all of these expirations, you can see it is basically in line with current price, except for 7 days from now. Let's look at it. So you can see next couple days could go a little bit higher, recoup some of those losses. And then for the Friday session, it is still basically in line with current price. So maybe we see kind of an up move in the next day or two. Not a whole lot of one, $3, and then we move a little bit lower into the Friday and then Monday. Pretty decent pop from there, back up to 572. Really no major moves until we get all the way down here to December, where markets are pricing in a much weaker level here. 6.66% lower, 4% lower, 7.5% lower. So seems like markets think they are going to go lower eventually. You can actually see it here on the 14th as well, 6.66% lower. But for right now, we seem fairly stable. Moving over to the charts, looking at the SPX, you can see we did reject off that trend line. This is where I keep all of my longer term trends, and you can see we are still hovering at an area of support, even with the down move of about 1% that took us right to the trend line here. Critical zone momentum back to bearish, so that was a bit of a head fake on Friday. That's what I was concerned about. We got the gap up. Didn't really gap down too much here on the SPY, but the NASDAQ was definitely a gap down and fall right to this previous support level that we had from the Tuesday up until the Thursday before we got that bounce. So critical zone here. Just behind it, you have the 21 EMA at 56.68, but you can see momentum bearish, RSI bearish. Based on this, you would expect it to break. And then looking at the SPY specifically, you can see this rising wedge we've been watching. Didn't get back to that upper level like I thought that we might. That was at 576.20, but it seems like we're kind of rolling over already. If this breaks down, 21 EMA 565.33, again momentum, RSI, everything still looks bearish. And then below that in terms of dynamic support is 553.80. And then looking at those short time frames here on the hourly, you can see big down candle was the 1300 candle. Basically all the losses for the day were in that candle. You can see a little bit of a gap down, choppy action, and then pushed right through the level here, through the trend line here, right to these previous lows. That structure has not quite broken. On the hourly though, this trend line is broken, so that's interesting. You can see we held it here. You could argue if it's broken or not still on the daily chart, but based on this, your next support is going to be 565.16, and you would expect a touch of that tomorrow in my opinion. And then looking at the 4-hour chart, you can see that 566.66 is the level here. That is your 89 EMA. We touched that on the 11 o'clock candle here on the 4-hour for the SPY. ATR trailing stop still in bearish conditions. Obviously no change there with the big down move, but that is the support If that level holds, we're okay. And we're about $1 above it right now. If it breaks, based on the 4-hour chart, your next support would be 563.25. And then below that, you have the lowest ATR band sitting all the way down at 561.02. So critical zone here, need that to hold. Again, it's about $1 lower. As long as that holds, we're okay. You can see it did hold on this previous test here over the last couple days. And now we're testing it once again. Moving over to the NASDAQ, we did get a down day here as well, 1.17. You can see that momentum is still carrying this to the downside. We had the bullish pop on Friday, and actually here on the NASDAQ, you can see the gap up, doji gap down, fell through that level. Next support is the 21 EMA there at 19,650. Based on that, it's about another 0.7% down move. We'll see if it follows through. If that structure breaks, your next support is all the way down here at 19,400. Back in this consolidation before we saw this gap up and rally. So right now, this continues to look a little bit bearish. You can also argue high, lower high, but we also looked for that here. That did give us the rejection off of this. Question is, where is this going to fall to? Are we going to get a retest of this trend line down around here? Certainly a possibility. Either way, short-term bearish, and then we'll see what happens if we get into that zone. And then looking at these short time frames here, you can see again, 1300 candle was the big down candle. 481.94 is the support. We broke that level on that candle close, but then we got right back above it on the 1400 candle. Saw a little bit of a pop into the after hours. I don't expect that to last. I think this is going to break here. I think we're going to get back below the 481.94 level. If it does, you do have a little bit of support in here. These previous bottoms found support around 479.50. To be fair though, they did touch my level at 477.69. You can see we touched it here at 10 o'clock on Tuesday. Very, very close again at 8 o'clock on the Wednesday last week before finding that momentum into the Friday session. So critical zone here, we're still holding this support. And you can actually see on the NASDAQ charts, I did throw in this trend line just barely, very, very small trend line. Again, just going back to Tuesday, kind of marks these bottoms. I'm not sure why it's not populating on both of these here. Really should, but either way, it's holding just a very slight higher low here from this previous low. I don't think it's going to hold up. I still think this is going to break down, but for now, it's still inside this consolidation range. Moving over to the NASDAQ here on the 4-hour chart, this did hold up a little bit better. Again, 89 EMA, same as the SPY, holding in there. That is at 480.66. Touched that level just for a moment and then caught a bounce. Right now it's at 480.70, still holding up. Again, it's about $1.50 lower before it touches that again. If it breaks, your next support is the 144 down at 177.83, which is pretty much in line with the levels we talked about. Decent volume coming through on that selling candle. Still bearish ATRs. If these levels break in here, your next ATR is all the way down at 473.58. That's this lower ATR band. But it's also worth noting, you can see these ATR bands are pulling in a little bit. Seems like we're getting a tighter consolidation, waiting for some clear direction, which does fit with still being inside of that consolidation range. Moving over to the Russell and the Dow. Russell gapped down and fell just like everything else. Broke the level 218.13, trend support down here at 216.50, touched that level, and then caught a little bit of a bounce. Finished in the middle of the candle, so there's still some buyers in here. Momentum back to bearish, RSI back to bearish. That's not great. The low of the day was all the way down at 215.87. Again, that's a pretty deep cut. Got all the way into the body of the candle on Thursday before catching a little bit of a bounce. Right now it's up a smidgen after hours, hanging in there okay. Looking for that 218.13 level. If that breaks, maybe we see an upswing, but for right now this is still a downtrend in the short term. And then looking at the Dow, gapped through the trend line here, fell right to the next level for 1838. And the 21 EMA sitting there as well for 1823. And then VWAP just behind it for 1802. So critical zone here. Momentum RSI still bearish, but still within this same trading range. Same one that we saw here on Wednesday the 25th. Moving over to stocks that moved today, we got Super Micro jumping 15.79%. Big move there. I have a level at 48.89. I had to move these around a little bit after the stock split on Super Micro, so I had to reestablish these levels. But I do think 48.89 is going to be important. That's the low from back here on the 7th of August. Critical zone there. You can see we gapped through that level previously. I also have this very long downtrend line, which is parallel to these other two. Very important. We're right there at the trend line here. Marks the top back in August. Marks some levels here in June as well as the end of July. So we'll see if it can break through there. If it does, I think there's going to be some more in it. 48.89. If it can get above that, 63.05 is potentially in play. Big move, big volume, RSI breaking out, MACD breaking out. So I think there's a little bit more room here, even with the big move today. And then these China stocks just continue to go crazy. 13% here on the yin. This is triple shares, so it is 3 times leverage. But even with that, that means that China stocks jumped about 3.5% to 4%, somewhere in there. So big volume, momentum bullish. This continues to run like crazy. Moving over to Apple and Microsoft, both of these had a major breakdown here today, 2.25, and Microsoft going 1.57. Momentum bearish, RSI bearish, everything continuing to look weak here. Apple looking to hit that 217.68 level. If it does get there, that's going to be another almost 2% move tomorrow. I do think that it will, similar to these previous ones. Once this broke here, we did go to that next level. And we did break it here on a closing basis. I think there's more to it to the downside. This looks like a clear double top now with that clear breakdown below the 224.36 level. Everything looks bad there, and then Microsoft doing the same thing. Took out the level here at 213.36, took out the 200. We talked about that before. At this point, it's probably going to go down to the trend line around the 396.09 level. How quickly it goes, hard to say. It's already been a pretty substantial fall from this previous high. We're down about 7%. If it gets to that next trend, that's going to be around 10%. So certainly could do it. That would also take us at least to these previous lows back from the 6th. So it hasn't been very long since we were there. I do think it's going to go. I do think it has more to the downside. Moving over to Tesla and NVIDIA. Tesla also falling 3.7%. Right down to the 21 EMA. That's sitting at 241.47. After hours price 241.41. So pretty much right on top of it. Momentum bearish, RSI bearish. Still think this is headed down to that 232.57 level, especially after the move that we saw here today. Volume didn't really go with it, but I still think there's some more move in there. And then look at NVIDIA. This did exactly what we thought it was going to do. We saw the break of the 124.69 level, went right to the next price target, 130.35. If it can get through there, your next level is all the way up here at the trend, 138. But this is an important top here. You can see big consolidation, held this level for a long time. There's definitely going to be some sellers in there. That's why it was our first price target. And you can also see some sellers did come in here today. So this might be done in the short term, especially with markets falling, but it is worth noting 2.25% up when nearly everything else was down. Moving over to Amazon and Alphabet, both of these cratering as well, 3.06 and 2.47. Amazon taking out the level, 181.41, so your next support, 179.50. If that breaks, your next is the 200, all the way down at 177.12. I think you could do that fairly quickly, so that's about 0.75%. Next one would be around 2% lower. Wouldn't shock me if it did all of that tomorrow, to be honest. And then looking at Alphabet, pushed right to the trend line, almost to the penny. Big candle there. Momentum stepping back to bearish. It had been fading, but that's a big move now. RSI breaking below the SMA, volume ramping on that sell. Based on that, I would expect to move to the 200, which is about 2.25% lower, down to the 161 area. And then you got trend behind that, 159.38. So everything looks pretty awful, to be honest. Moving over to staples and discretionary. Staples falling nearly 1%. Broke that level, pushed nearly to the next one at 80.54. The low of day was 80.56, so missed it by 2 cents. You can call it a touch if you want. Momentum still bearish, RSI bearish. We'll see if it can get through here. Maybe fill the gaps back to this candle here. The close there was 79.47, which is a pretty substantial move from here. It's about 1.5% lower. If it gets there, realistically, you're probably going to hit the 144 down at 78.24. So looks like we might round trip a lot of this move. It was super aggressive. We talked about it. Got the big rejection, consolidation, breakdown. So definitely a bearish structure. See how it plays from there. And it wasn't everything sell, so you can see discretionaries down 1.55%. Momentum bearish, RSI bearish. Took out the 21, holding VWAP there at 194.85, and then my next level, 193.81. If this zone breaks, your next support's all the way down here at 189.38, which is pretty much back to this consolidation. Again, almost going to round trip this if we get there. Momentum and RSI are both bearish. Moving over to oil and gas, continuing to watch this one closely. It was slightly positive, so if you're looking for something that's not correlated with markets, oil and gas continues to be a good candidate. Up 0.62, finding resistance at the 200, 142.40, so critical zone there, kind of stuck between 140.88 and that level there. Momentum and RSI still look good. We're still above the level, so everything's still intact, but that 200 seems to be an important zone for markets. And then looking at transports, down 0.28. Honestly, I thought this would be worse. Momentum and RSI still bearish. Didn't even touch the level there at 66.63, the same level that we touched on Thursday last week. We did get to the low from the Friday candle, But like I said, this looks okay. I wouldn't be rushing out of this stock quite yet. 66, 68, need that level to hold. 200 just behind it, 66.40. Moving over to RIOT and Marathon, interesting to see these doing some weird things. Usually they move pretty well correlated, but today they did move different. So RIOT, 3.95%, nearly 4% higher, got through this downtrend line. Through a wick, the high of day was all the way up at 852, my level 878. Based on this break here, there should be a little bit more in it, and it's up about 1 cent after hours. Big volume coming through on RIOT. I wonder if something's going on with RIOT that I'm not tracking. But based on everything you see here, 4 bullish days in a row, big movement, continuation. I think this is going to go here a little bit more. So RIOT looking pretty good. Marathon pulling back about 2%, nothing crazy. Still sitting at VWAP and the 21 EMA. So your support right now is 15.91. Current price $15.99 for the close, $15.95 after hours. Moving over to Breadth, big reversal on Breadth, just like everything else. Gap up, gap down, fell right through the level, 51.75. Got almost to these lows here, really did touch them. The low of day was 43.62, and I would call this zone around 42.70, so very, very close to the zone of this previous consolidation before the bounce. We'll see if that zone matters. My guess is that it's not going to. Momentum and RSI are still pretty bearish. I think we probably go down to the next level here at 36.60. So based on that, a little bit more bearishness to come, maybe 1 or 2 more days, which again fits with the overall seasonality. And then same here on 50-day breadth. We're still kind of riding this structure here, but this looks like a break to me. Got below these trend lines, touched the 200, touched my next level, 62.25, nearly touched my level, 62.25. The low of day was 62.35, so call it a touch if you want to. Momentum and RSI both bearish. I think this has got some more to it. I think we at least get to these lows here around 58.10, and then if that zone breaks, you do have the 52.81. We could see something like this, where you get low, consolidation, throw a big wick to the level, and then get a follow through to the upside. Either way, I think we're going to touch that zone here. I do think there's some more bearishness to come on breadth, so don't buy into these short-term rallies. They should be relatively short-term, just to induce a little bit more selling in my opinion. Overall, big down days on both, 22.03 and 11.6% respectively. Moving over to yields. Yields are rocketing higher. Again, another very strong up day. 10-year at 4.02, almost 4.03. We're about to hit overbought conditions. RSI is at 68.96. Momentum still very bullish. Similarly here on the 2-year, 66.73, just off of that 70 level. Got a trend here at 4.1. And then it looks like the 10-year might push up to that 200, up around 4.17. Again, 10-year note auction coming up. I think that's going to see where the market really is with yields. Where are people willing to buy new bonds? Right now, pretty aggressive, maybe in that 4.1, 4.2 area, which just feels really aggressive to me. I think we're probably overbought here on yields, especially because we're considering another 50 basis points this year. So that brings you down to about 4.5, and then some more cuts next year. So really, these should be lower in 2 years' time. So the 2-year pull back to 3.5 generally based on the dot plot. 10-year, obviously more variability within the next 10 years, but right now they just seem a little too high for me. Moving over to the dollar. Dollar did absolutely nothing on the day, completely flat, 0% move. Doji candle, didn't do anything. Right now, probably just a pullback in time. We've had a very strong run. That was 5 days in a row of very powerful bullish price action. Might be waiting for some inflation data that we're getting later in the week, but again, could be just a very powerful move, finding some consolidation. Everything still looks bullish, so I would expect this consolidation to break to the upside. You have a pretty clear top here now, up around 102.62. Moving over to bonds, these both cratered here today, 0.48 and 0.75 respectively. Momentum and RSI both pretty bearish on these. 96.51 broke, 55 EMA is your next support, 96.34. I would expect that to bounce at this point, considering how aggressive the fall has been. Probably going to see some consolidation lows from back here in September, see if that holds. And then this has been a little bit more aggressive than I thought it would be on TLT. We did see this retest back here on the 1st, expected the down move from there, but then we pushed right through 96.50. 200 is your next support at 94.3. This was a big move up. I thought we were going to hold some of these gains and continue with this trend, but we've broken this structure now. Doesn't look great. I do think we're going to hold the higher low from here, but that could take you all the way down into the 91.80s. Either way, medium term, I still like bonds, but it'll be interesting to see how this plays in here. Moving over to volatility, with the MOVE index and the VIX, it's not super often you see these huge up candles on bond volatility. Bond volatility spiked massive, took out all these previous levels. Seems like there's definitely some risk getting priced in right now. Momentum and RSI, super bullish on that. And then looking at the VIX, big up move there as well, 17.9%, hit the price target, which was 22.5. Now we're going to see what happens. This was the previous top. If it pushes through, 28.8 is the next level. Momentum and RSI say that it still could. Everything looks pretty bullish on the VIX. Held the low, higher low, basically double bottom in here. Now we're pushing, waiting to see if this breaks. And you can see that was a consolidation top before we had that huge spike. Doesn't happen super often, but that does seem like the zone, 28.89. Moving over to my accounts, I did okay. It says I was down about 200, but I think I did a little better than that. I think it was closer to 150. All I did was roll out my puts here to 217 for tomorrow. That's in a slight winner here now. Ended up down $23 on that account, with the IWM down a little bit less than 1%. So pretty good there. And then the Qs, that was down $5. Again, all I did was roll that down to 480. Might have been a little too aggressive with that. My max profit now is 483. I can certainly roll it out to the next day if I need to, but I wanted to be pretty cautious. Still have some positive deltas. I think the risk is to the downside. I nearly took these shares off today and then put on some puts to help protect myself a little bit more. But we saw a little bit of a bounce. We held some supports into the close in the after hours. So I just wanted to be a little bit patient. Either way, held in there okay for today. If we get another move like today, though, I do expect much, much lower prices. So we're still doing all right now, but definitely at some more risk. Let me know down in the comments section what you think of markets. How deep is this cut going to go? How much follow through will it have? Or are we just going to bounce here pretty soon? Definitely like and subscribe if you got any value out of this video, and make sure you hit the bell so you don't miss out on any future episodes. Of course, none of this is financial advice. This is all for entertainment purposes. Good luck in your trading and have a great day.